Okay, so thank you everybody for joining us on this webinar today. We are really appreciative of everybody's interest, and we look forward to what we hope to be a really robust discussion and an exciting discussion as to the future of our company. Just to open up remarks, for those of you that haven't seen me before, my name is Peretz Schapiro. I am an Executive Director at Torian Resources. Joining me today, we have Paul Summers, our Executive Chair, Mr. Claudio, Sheriff-Zegers, who is our Senior Geologist and Exploration Manager, and Matthew Foy, our Company Secretary. The way that the structure of today's webinar will be, I'll give you some opening remarks, and then it's really throwing it open to the floor to submit questions. There is a Q&A button down the bottom of your screen that you'll be able to submit any questions, and we will try and answer as many questions as possible as the time allows. In terms of an opening, I'll just reflect on the fact that about a week and a half ago or so, myself and Paul traveled out to Leonora, to the Mount Sterling Gold Camp and to Tamula Station, and it was great to be there in person, up close to the ground that we're currently exploring. The best part about it was that having seen, speaking to the locals over there, having Claudio explain to us exactly what is going on, it made us feel even more excited about our prospects. It made us feel a lot more excited about our future, and just the vast amount of really, really good ground in terms of our land holding and tenure really filled us with confidence that we are very much on the right track to building up a really significant company moving forward. It was great to see it in person, and as such, great to be filled with even more confidence than we were prior to that. Obviously, it's quite an exciting time, having just closed the station acquisition, which I'm sure some of you will have questions on. And of course, with our JORC coming up very soon, and our continuous exploration program at the Mount Sterling Gold Camp, which I'm sure many of you will ask about. I guess I'll just throw it open to the floor now for questions. And while we wait for some questions to come in, if Claudio or Paul, either of you would like to share any opening remarks as well.
Claudio, I'll hand over to you first.
I guess I'd like to say hi to everyone who's joined this morning. Appreciate your time. Look, it's a very exciting time for the company. Obviously, the interim resource only a week, 2 weeks away. All the assays data that we wanted to have for this time is now in. So working with the resource geologist to provide that interim update, and just bear in mind it is just an interim update at this stage. We've got quite a lot of potential there to vector on down plunge on a long strike. It's astounding, really. 6 months of drilling now into Mount Sterling, and we're still at an extensional phase as such. I haven't planned any infill holes as such, and yeah, quite excited about the following quarters to come.
Thank you. I guess we'll jump straight in for our first question today. Could you re-explain the Boolean effect structure and positives and negatives for shareholders? So yeah, we have been fielding a number of questions about this. I did a interview on Share Cafe explicitly discussing the transaction. For those of you that have watched that, you probably would understand a little bit more. But for those that haven't, and for the benefit of those that have and still would like further clarification, the way that the Boolean effects deal works from a corporate point of view is Torian actually doesn't have to pay anything, whilst we are potentially paying for a share in Boolean effects, and I'll go through the exact numbers in a moment. We're paying that through scrip. In other words, we would issue $1 million worth of Torian shares. However, those shares of Torian are not actually issued to Boolean effects unless Boolean effects hits certain milestones. So until those milestones have been hit, Torian hasn't actually parted with any cash or even with any shares. What those milestones are as follows. Torian's entry price into Boolean effects was purchasing shares, 5 million shares at 20 cents in Boolean effects. And then on top of that, we received 10 million free advisory shares, advising Boolean effects as to the gold industry and the way that I guess the gold industry works, and to help them as they're marketing their gold token. Which essentially brings down our purchase price in Bullion FX, considering those 10 million free shares, to 7.5 cents. As part of the conditions that we between us and Bullion FX is that we will only actually have to issue that US $1 million worth of stock if Bullion FX is traded on a secondary market or is taken over at a minimum valuation of 50 cents per share. So essentially, unless our investment goes up 7 times, we actually don't have to pay for our investment. So from that perspective, it's a pretty sweet deal. There are only upsides for Torian. It's obviously not our core business and it's not our focus, but it's something which an opportunity came our way, and we felt it's a great opportunity to get into an evolving space with very, very little, if any, downside risk. So from a strategic point of view, we felt it would be worthwhile, and it can significantly boost our balance sheet moving forward. On that topic, I've been in touch with Bullion FX quite regularly, and I've asked them this morning to give me an update because I knew I would have some questions. And I'll just read to you their update as to how they're going at the moment. So Bullion FX are on track to list both the gold token and the bullion token in Q2 of this year. Currently, 2 exchanges have been signed up. In Q2, prior to both the gold and bullion token listing, Bullion FX intend to announce and launch payments and other products to allow users to spend and leverage gold. Further information on payments and other products will be available on bullionfx.com during May. Bullion FX have also opened a head office in Dubai in the DMCC zone and are in the running to receive the first cryptocurrency license in the DMCC zone. The office will be operational by June and has already entered due diligence with a range of strategic partners, including 3 banks, to distribute and market gold tokens and payment systems. In Q1, Bullion FX raised US $4 million and is currently in discussions with several brokers around completing a 10 to 20 million round at US 50 cents to prepare for its own listing on the NASDAQ. During Q1, Bullion FX also minted approximately 400 million bullion tokens, which received a significant amount of interest prior to its own pre-sale. Bullion tokens have traded at US 32 cents and expect to trade higher in Q2. So if you just go on that alone, that they've recently traded at 32 cents, that's already at 4.5 times our investment in Bullion FX. Again, we still haven't paid for it yet, and we'll only pay for it, I guess, once we're almost 7 times up. But thank you for the question. And I guess in general, in terms of updates about Bullion FX, we did receive quite a lot of pushback from the ASX, which was unfortunate, and it really was disappointing to be in suspension for so long. And we are very careful about releasing any other information to the market with regards to Bullion FX in our future announcements, just because we are afraid that it might hold up those announcements moving forward. The ASX do have lots of particular questions about it. So for shareholders that are interested in the Bullion FX investment and how that's going, I'd suggest that you reach out to them directly and find out from Bullion FX how their business is moving. Obviously, once and if Torian ever has to part with its $1 million worth of shares, that would obviously be announced to the market. And if that happens, well, our balance sheet straight away is up 7 times almost on that investment. Thank you for the question. Are there any other questions today? Seems like we've just got the one. Everyone's quite happy, quite well informed. So again, just a reminder to type in your questions. You can click on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and you could put in your questions through there. I'll just bring up another question that I was asked just before the webinar that was sent through to us, and Claudio probably be best to address this. Is what is the time frame in terms of the JORC resource at Mount Sterling?
The time frame at this moment, I guess that the item of the resource that will take the longest would be the assays and the check assays with the Umpire Lab. That's all been completed, so we've received I'd say 98% of the assays we wanted to include into the interim resource estimate update. We've had the QA/QC from the reference lab back for a few weeks now. We've got all the holes picked up. So I would say now it's a matter of the resource geologists and the modelling of the individual gold domains. So the previous resource estimate had 7. We're up to 9 now. So we're working with the resource geologists to incorporate each and every one of those domains into the. It's about an 18 section. So we drilled at 18 at 40 meter spacing, 18 sections, comes to about 720 meter strike from memory. So it's quite a substantial resource interim update in terms of space. So I'd say within 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks at this stage to be conservative for the delivery.
Yeah, and you did mention earlier, just with regards to the fact that, so this is in conversation that I had with you, the areas which might delay the resource obviously are the assays which have all been received now, but also the fact that because we've got so many domains that we're looking at, that sometimes that might take longer, which is a good thing because it means that we're potentially on a much bigger amount of ounces and tonnage.
That's correct, Peretz. And we've got a pretty good grasp of the RL domain now. So we've got certain factors as to the length, the RL depth, so how deep the system we've tested. Some sections will have 3 pierce points, some will have 5. So obviously that RL difference does change from section to section. And these 9 zones, look, some are 20 meters true width and some are 1.5 meters true width. So it does vary substantially across the deposit strike.
Okay, thank you, Claudio. During that period, we've received a whole lot of questions through the Q&A. With the intention to debt fund the majority purchase of Tarmoola Station, is this short-term to be repaid by the option exercise? So thank you for the question. The answer to that is we have a number of debt funding options on the table. I don't want to disclose what those rates are at this point. And the reason for that is because we are in negotiations with a number of funders and obviously trying to get the best price for Torian. And if I tell everybody what prices we're looking at, obviously that hampers our negotiations with our funders. But there are a number of options on the table to fund the majority of the purchase. How we would repay that debt, I guess the option exercise, bringing about $9.5 million or so into the company, that is a possibility in terms of repaying our debt. Ideally, what we would like to do is roll over the debt onto a longer term tier 1 finance approach. And the reason that we'll be able to do that is because we've been informed by the major banks that the agricultural asset, or from an agri perspective, as they say, the assets are really, really good asset. The difficulty is that because we're a resource exploration company, we don't really fit into a box. We don't fit into a mining loan because we're obviously not purchasing this. We're not actually taking a loan for a mine. We also don't fit into an agricultural loan because we're not farmers coming to buy that asset. However, over the next few months, once we're able to prove that Tarmoola Station is able to operate on its own and is funded on its own and is profitable on its own, they're very, very interested in securing our business for an interest-only loan with a pretty significant and decent LVR, which again, to tap into the debt market for a company like ours, would really save on shareholder dilution and is a much cheaper way of raising capital. So that is ultimately the intention. Should the market significantly change over the period, we may look at those options that are being converted, and that obviously provides security as well and peace of mind to potential funders when they're looking at funding us. So there are a number of options that we have on the table, and they're all quite attractive from a shareholder perspective. Paul, would you like to add anything to that? You're on mute. Sorry, Paul. There you go.
The only thing I want to add is that, as Peretz says, our intention is to treat Tarmoola as a standalone enterprise. It's obviously got very substantial benefit to Torian, but Torian, we believe in its own right, is going to be a very profitable exercise, and it has got a profitable history. So we believe that with 12-month history, it's most likely that we'll continue a debt funding facility, and we'll then have the opportunity, in answering the question we've received, of using the funds we received from the option exercise more to put into the ground than to operate the station.
Yeah, ideally the station is going to run itself. We don't want to use any shareholder funds to operate the station. There might be initially a little bit of working capital that has to go in, but the station has been profitable in the past, and we intend to keep it profitable moving into the future, and also bring down our costs of exploration, having the camp, the earth moving equipment, etc. Also, as a primary producer, we get fuel at a greater discount and energy at a greater discount as well. So it does offer us a lot of benefits, and really strengthens our land holding in the region. And we have a question here about Mount Monger. So I will answer that question. So Mount Monger is is made up of two projects that are about 50 kilometers southeast of Kalgoorlie. Claudio might be able to share a little bit more. I'll pass on to him in a moment just to talk a little bit about the ground at Mount Monger. But essentially the company over the last year and a half has been quite clear to the market that we were sitting on significant parcels of land. And whilst a lot of it was really good land, our holding costs were quite high. And for a small company like ourselves, the holding costs were significant, which could really bury the company in the long term, could end up in some expenditure spiral. But in addition to that, even if we were to expend resources at numerous grounds, we'd have to raise significant funds, and before you knew it, there'd be lots and lots and lots of shares, potentially millions of shares on issue, raising the capital to fund these various projects. Now, what we felt would be, and as the company is what we've done over the last years, we've sold, as you'd be aware, the Malcolm project, which is under option, and we are looking at receiving funds for that to complete the sale. We've obviously done the JV with Zuleika Gold on our Zuleika ground, and the Monger project and the Gibraltar project, instead of raising $4 or $5 million in Torian and thereby diluting Torian further to explore and the Monger ground, which Claudio, I'll pass on to you in a moment to talk about a little bit, we felt that it wouldn't be worthwhile, that dilution and dual focus would not enable us to focus on the Mount Sterling Gold Camp, where we are really, what we're really excited about, what we've been focusing on till now. And therefore we wouldn't really be able to pay much attention to Mount Monger. And I always say that having 100% of 0 is less than owning 10% of 100. And by spinning out Mount Monger into its own entity, it's able to raise its own money. It can do the project justice, and Torian will still own a 10% shareholding in the company, plus a 20% free carry JV in Mount Monger, in the projects, I should say. So, and a 2% royalty as well moving forward. So from Torian's perspective, we felt this was the best deal to maximize shareholder value from Mount Monger. We also didn't feel that it was being valued in Torian's market cap at the moment. In terms of, I guess, from a corporate perspective, the IPO is pretty much closed. We might be open for one more day, although the prospectus says till the 24th of May. It's likely that we'll close that tonight or even tomorrow. There's been exceptional demand for it. And it's quite a attractively priced IPO. And we've done that so that Torian shareholders, we've given a priority offer to Torian shareholders as well to get involved, raising $5 million in cash, and on listing at 20 cents, the enterprise value of Monger Gold will be $5.6 million. So from that perspective, it is quite attractive. But I'll hand over to Claudio to talk a little bit more about the actual ground at Mount Monger. And whilst we are, I guess, selling it, it's still important that we, as Torian shareholders, are aware of its potential, because we will own an interest in the project and in the company.
Just following on from Peretz, look, the project, you've got Wombler and you've got Mount Monger Wombler and Mount Monger South. Look, enormous shallow oxide potential at Wombala. It's literally, there's a couple of existing historical pits. It's all the structures that go through those pits go through the Torian, well, Mount Monga ground, Monga gold ground. Numerous historical workings. We can clearly see mineralization extending to not just along strike, but also the stratigraphy is quite complex at Monga. So there's BIFs, there's a lot of folding, there's a lot of structure, the right rocks, but there is actually quite enormous open pittable material potential. It's not just a few meters, there's 50, 60, 80 meters plus of oxide material there. So walk-up drill target. So I can clearly see the company moving, once listed, to some of those drill-ready targets. Now, looking at Monga South, there's enormous potential there. It's been basically blind to historical exploration. There was enough cover there to make any mineralization blind as such to the old prospectors. So there's an enormous amount of potential with regards to the Monga fault running through that ground, which has been, it's kept Silver Lake that's been out there, Daisy Milano. All those mines are on that same structure. So there's enormous potential for Wombala South once exploration is systematically carried out on that part of the project. But yeah, look, and as a bit of a Swede, and I was pretty impressed with the amount of ultramafic rocks in the region. I wasn't aware of that amount of differentiation of ultramafic rocks. So it's straight up enormous potential for nickel as well, which has probably been downplayed. So yeah, it's it'll be a very good couple of quarters as once Monga Gold is listed, obviously, and some synergy between the companies, I'm sure, as well.
Do you want to talk about the neurology there as well with Lefroy, Claudio?
Look, Lefroy have got onto it's not a new discovery, it's a rediscovery. It's a copper gold system. It's not I don't believe it's a structural copper gold or just a pure gold play. I do think there's enormous VMS potential in that region. Obviously, we are adjoining tenement holders in that neck of the woods, and it's a very big region. So I do think that opens up the company or anybody that has adjoining ground on that part of the goldfields to enormous potential. As some people are aware, VMS is a cluster deposit, so it's not out of the realm of possibilities that we are sitting on some phenomenal grounds on Wombala South particularly.
Thank you, Claudio. Next question is, do we anticipate quarterly updates to the JORC? I guess the short answer to that is we're expecting the JORC, as Claudio mentioned, in the next couple of weeks. So we should have the JORC from Mount Sterling. The lab turnaround hasn't helped us, but we did use that time, as was announced to the market, we did use that time to bring in some more holes and to get some more results to slip that into the JORC. And as we always said, our objective was we'd rather a larger JORC than a on-time JORC if we had to, a potentially larger JORC than an on-time JORC if we had to choose between the two. The next JORC update that we're looking at receiving is a JORC update from Sterling Well, and that drilling program is underway. It's about halfway through this current phase of the program, and that should be finished about the end of the week or so, and mid next week is when we're looking at, obviously depending on weather. I know they've had some rain there yesterday or so, but that should be done in about a week. That will all be submitted to the labs. Lab turnaround time is what we are, I guess, is the biggest blockage in terms of time frame for the JORC. And then our next JORC update would likely be again back to Mount Sterling to continue to expand on that. As we all know, we spent 6 months drilling almost, and we're still extending the resource or the size of the system, I should say. So there'll be something there as well, hopefully, before the end of the year. So that's 3 JORCs we could look forward to before the options expire. in February next year. If the bullion effect, next question is, if the bullion FX investment does go ahead, could we assume that a relatively quick sale of some of the issued shares of bullion FX provided to Torian could also immediately cover the initial investment and we would then be carried at zero cost? It's a good question, Luke. As part of the deal with bullion FX, there is an escrow period, there's a 12-month escrow period, and that works both ways. So we're escrowed in bullion FX for 12 months, bullion FX are escrowed in us for 12 months, our shares that they'll hold. However, that escrow won't apply if bullion FX are actually taken over. If they're taken over, then there won't be an escrow, and then we would potentially look to sell those shares to free carry. Yes, ideally, we would like to minimize that risk completely. And when we get the opportunity, I guess depending on market conditions as well, we would look to cover our initial investment at least. And depending on where we see the bullion FX business going, we would hold or sell or double down, who knows? But it is an exciting little space, as I'm sure everybody is aware at the moment. So that's where we're at with bullion FX. When can we expect to see results for diorite drilling? Can you expand on the reason for the significant delay? Thanks. So I'll start with that and then I'll hand over to Claudio. So I did, in our most recent announcement, I did elaborate on it a little bit. Sorry, it wasn't an announcement. It was a letter that I sent to a shareholder. Apologies. Essentially, what's happened is that the diorite exploration program was the first part of our exploration program when we started drilling at Mount Sterling project and at that project towards the end of last year in about October. That part of the program was carried out by a previous geologist who is no longer with the company. And it was partially submitted to labs to test for gold only. When Claudio joined the company pretty much soon after that, and while some of those samples were being submitted, we immediately recognized going through the diorite area that there's more potential for other types of mineralization, and that would also help vector to gold. And Claudio, you can touch on that in a moment, more from a technical perspective. And given the turnaround times of the lab, also suggested that we pull those jobs and resubmit them for multi-element assaying. Our attention then turned to Mount Sterling in terms of the drilling program there, and to try and get that resource out as quickly as possible and drill out those holes as quickly as possible. We prioritized at the lab all of our Mount Sterling drill results so we get them first. There wasn't a rush to get the diorite results because we weren't waiting on a resource, and we also wouldn't be drilling at diorite soon whilst we, at the time, I should suggest, this is back in December, whilst we were still carrying out a significant program at Mount Sterling. At the time, and this might relate to something else which we'll touch on a little bit later, the intention was to stop drilling kind of end of Jan, mid-Feb, and then kind of wait and see where the company goes from there. Obviously, through the discovery of Torian and discovery of the significant potential out to the northwest, the plans were to continue drilling well into the year. So that's why the diorite results essentially were delayed, because we prioritized Mount Sterling results at the lab. That being said, now that 98%, what Claudio mentioned, of the Mount Sterling results have been received, we should expect to see some diorite results now in the coming weeks. And we also have a drilling campaign planned there as well once we finish at Sterling Well. And I'll hand over to Claudio to talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, look, following up from what Peretz has explained, that's exactly where we were back in November, December last year. Most of that drilling was done by October. There was a couple of holes that were drilled late October, early November from memory. Mm-hmm. And look, some of my first field trips to diorite, I was quite impressed with the potential. Historically significant, the endowment significant, so the potential clearly significant. We were also resource drilling a jog, so we quite strategically chose to prioritize those jobs that were adding clear ounces and tonnage to the company rather than the exploration drilling. So it was quite a strategic decision. In the first lab that those samples were submitted to was ALS. We were quoted 8 to 9 weeks turnaround. Then after about 3 weeks of being at the lab, we got quoted that they would get sent to Adelaide for an extra, it was just going to stretch it out to 2 to 3 months. So we then resubmitted them to a different lab, and the turnaround was at the 8 to 9 week period, turnover period. So we trickled the resource jobs first. We trickled every single one of the Mount Sterling interim resource update holes. There were some Mount Sterling well holes that we prioritised, and a handful of diorite holes which we released to the market as we had an opportunity to. In the background of all this, we've been doing compilation work, so it's still an integral part of the Mount Sterling project, the diorite potential. So it's now in the compilation work. Some of the the structural thoughts that I had initially have come to light. So what I'm saying here is that the previous drilling targeted too much of the geochemical signature of diorite. So the contacts were targeted, but the model we're following now is the structural gold-bearing trends. So that's where we are with the focus going forward. A lot of the drilling that was done in the past targeted the contacts of rocks, which will help us vector to these structures, and we can now recognize these structures. So the upcoming results will aid in piecing together this context for us, and our follow-up drilling is entirely focused to these structures which we believe host mineralization. And this is confirmed by historical workings. This is confirmed by what we're seeing on the ground. So nice sheared rocks with all the indicator minerals that we see in the region. So it's an analogy for what we're seeing at Mount Sterling. It's an analogy for what's being drilled along the Ursus fault. But the potential at diorite is that the grades are phenomenally higher. We're on a different playing field. So I do foresee some quite outstanding results from diorite. I think it's just a matter of time for us. It's probably really the first phase of drilling, other than the historical drilling that we've had available for us. So yeah, look, it's coming. The compilation work will come in a couple of weeks. It's just the pace that we've moved at Mount Sterling that we just haven't had the manpower to focus, but it's quite clearly a significant play for us. And it's it is from all accounts, historical accounts, from what we're seeing on the ground, it's just a matter of time until we piece it together and we get a couple of holes into a structure and we're away at diorite. I don't see it's longer than a quarter, to be honest.
Just on that topic, Claudio, if you could touch on the next question here, which is, will drilling occur at Little Wonder and Kenilworth mines in the near future?
Yes, look, it will. We are planning some drilling immediately north of Little Wonder. We've done quite a few site recce's, and the topography is quite challenging there. It's I know it looks flat from an image, but I'll make sure we put out some photos of the topography there. I mean, we're sitting on a granite. We're sitting north of Lake Rayside. Everything there as well. We're hoping to hit some structures that go north-northwest, and once we get those vectoring those results, we'll move further down towards Little Wonder. So I can also add that we have taken what come out of the compilation work, and we've taken that into regional context, and we have been quite active in picking up extra ground that we believe is along strike of these trends where we're clearly identifying and we can see now. So once again, that hopefully we get that into the next round of news and compilation and project prospect update for Diorite King and Diorite North, and obviously Diorite East, and obviously Little Wonder, which is moving along nicely in the next quarter.
Phenomenal historical grades out of the Little Wonder mine. And going there was actually remarkable. It's incredible how deep those shafts were built with the old tools 100 years ago or so. And they only went that deep if they actually saw gold. Obviously not with the technology that we have today. There had to be visible gold for them to go, and they just kept going. So yeah, it's quite astounding. what's out there. Made us very excited. What other announcements can be expected in the short term other than the imminent resource update? So just as Claudio just mentioned on, obviously completing the Sterling well drilling, we'll be starting to drill at Diorite very soon, and then ongoing exploration work in terms of drilling around the Mount Sterling Gold Project, and further follow-up drilling to further expand the resource at Mount Sterling. So from an exploration perspective, it's all guns blazing. There's no rest at Torian. We just keep going, don't we, Claudio?
We do. I guess, Peretz, in the next couple of weeks as well, we're looking at obviously what the regional targeting has thrown up at us. There's multiple shallow resource potential on Cutmore, as well as not that we will stop exploring the Ursus and the Viserian shear zone along to some of these intercepts. We've got 1 kilometre away, and obviously back towards the Ursus Viserian shear zone junction, further to the southeast of Mount Sterling itself. But the multiple structural corridors that we have on Cutmore, so enormous shallow open pittable prospectivity and potential there, and we're looking at moving that along as we continue to drill and convert into further tonnage and ounces at Mount Sterling. So quite a big program as we released the 50,000 commencement drilling some months back, and look, quite a bit more experience on the field crew now. As of every day we're out there getting XRF and mapping and getting further targets. So it's getting more difficult to come up with your top 10. We keep cutting targets off just to concentrate on the ones we can get through this year.
Just for everyone's reference, Cutmore is not a ground that we've referenced much in our announcements. That's the ground immediately to the north and to the east of Mount Sterling. This is what Claudio is referring to there. It's the ground that kind of comes around, for those that are familiar with the map. Just on that, in terms of the amount of targets, I mean, going to the ground, especially driving around with some of the old timers who do alluvial gold exploration, the amount of gold they've just found, just nuggets lying around everywhere, even today, is quite remarkable. We got years and years and years of exploration up that ground, and hopefully we continue to explore that ground whilst we obviously produce gold as well, hopefully in the near future as well. So that ground can keep us busy for a long, long time, and I guess goes back to what we said earlier about focusing there and having so much other ground that Torian possessed. We didn't need it to keep ourselves busy. We have such great ground at Leonora, and could be a company. Well, it is, we believe, a company maker in itself. How do we just get upside from the other ground that we hold, and then really focus on quite a big piece of ground in the Leonora region? It was about 70 odd kilometers, and picking up a few other little bits and pieces here and there as well to solidify that position. Someone's asked here, re-bullion affects potential. Will there be any further investigating into that area? Tokenization appears very promising. Yes, that market is running very hot at the moment. It's not our area, obviously. We are, at the end of the day, explorers, hopefully one day miners. Cryptocurrencies is not our area. The bullion FX deal is not something that we actively sought out. It came to us. And as I mentioned, being able to negotiate terms of a deal where we had very, very limited downside, and the fact that we believe this is the future of the gold industry is the, I guess, tokenization of gold. We're sitting pretty comfortable with that decision and that investment at this stage. And we're not, unless something phenomenal comes to us again, which we'd obviously look at, we're not looking at further advances in that area. We think we've taken a sizable enough position to diversify and also boost our balance sheet. Someone's asked here if the results of Sterling Well and Diorite last year. I believe that's been answered, that we should see those in coming weeks. Have you seen any signs of labs increasing resources to improve assay turnaround times? This is a bugbear not just of us, but of all exploration companies at the moment. For Claudio, what's the latest? What are you hearing?
Oh, look, I'm sure there have been, but I guess it's been touched on in some industry discussions. It's a limited number of labs. It's not a matter of just throwing more people at it. It's really on the processing of the samples where the time, particularly for the photons assaying method we use, it's all in the preparation, the prep time. The reading itself is in a matter of seconds, if not hours, for 100, 200 sample batch. So it's kind of like limited, and it's just the sheer demand, the exploration and mining demand of the industry right at this stage. So I tend to think that we'll see further delays. It's going to go the other way before it gets better. So we do have contingencies for quicker turnarounds, for possibly adopting a different assaying method, and where it's to our advantage, or whether it's to the mineralization signature as such, we stick with the photon where we think that's where the best value is for the project and for shareholders. So there are some things we can do to quicken things up, like some of the partial assaying we did for some of the resource drilling, and for when we have an opportunity of a rig or multiple rigs at a project to get a quick turnaround, we will pay the fees for that. It is possible, but you're creating your own problem when you start to engage in that game. If multiple companies start to pay a lot more, it doesn't eat the bottleneck, it just makes it worse. So we're working on a few contingencies, and I'm pretty happy also with the turnaround and the amount of what we said we would get into the resource. I'm very happy that that's what we'll deliver on.
Look, I think
Peretz, I'll just make the other point, just referring to a lot of the stuff you see on social media. There is actually a two-pronged problem with the assaying labs. One is obviously the huge demand. The other problem is that many of the technicians in the labs were brought in from overseas. They have obviously returned due to COVID, and a lot of the labs are very, very stretched in relation to technicians that they formerly had and are now unavailable to process the work that's going through. So there is a double-edged sword, unfortunately, with the labs. It's not only the increase in activity, it's also the decrease in specialists that are able to undertake the activities.
Mm. Yeah, look, as we all know in the sector, it is a frustration. Could we potentially pay more to get results earlier? Yeah, I guess we could, but as Claudio mentioned, that's also just a race to the bottom, in the sense that if everyone's paying that, it just increases the price of assaying altogether. I guess we're playing the long game, and the long game is the results will be the results, whether they're in 2 weeks or 3 weeks or in a month. At the end of the day, we continue to explore, and yes, there'll be a little bit of a backlog, but eventually that will clear. And playing that long game, whilst I guess as shareholders, people watching the market every day, that news is something which does tend to drive the share price sometimes. And we'd rather have results sooner rather than later from that perspective. But if we take a long-term picture, the ground is the ground. The results are the results. The results aren't going to change if they're 2 weeks after they've been drilled or 2 months after they've been drilled. Taking a long-term approach means we're saving a little bit of money for the company, which is obviously important, and also long-term, the results they're going to be the same, and eventually the labs, we believe, will catch up at a point. Given there's 50, so yeah.
Peretz, I'd just like to add that we've also got the screening of the XRF, so that's invaluable data for us. That does limit what we need to multi-element assay, for example, and it gives us a clear vector to some of the gold mineralization, both at Sterling Well and at Mount Sterling. So there is that technological help as well.
Do you want to just elaborate on how you found the Viserion to the northwest, how you found the Viserion lode, and how that came about?
Look, I've had quite a bit of experience with the portable XRF units, mainly in rare earths exploration. So in rare earths, you lose the radiometric signature. It's just a property of rocks, but you lose that over 2 mil of cover. So basically, anything that's outcropping you find with these spectrometers, as in the uranium, thorium exploration. with the XRF, we're so accurate with some of the base metals and some of these rare earths that we pioneered for one of the XRF suppliers. That I'm a quite big believer in the technology. I've used it for over 8 to 9 years. So we knew the link between arsenic to potentially some of the gold mineralization in the Leonora region, and we tried it out. Convinced Paul that I needed a Polaris, convinced Peretz that we needed a couple of these guns. I think we went for a couple and we got the one. So it was literally very good relationship with the PAS company in Sydney that supplied us with the technology and the good deals. We brought it out to site and we calibrated it and ran a few lines, and we went, hey, there's something here. There's a clear arsenic link. And literally the first day we had a field crew trained up. He went out on the Polaris, walked some of these lines, and within half a day came back with some quite high. And I mean, we talk ppm, we talk numbers of 10, 20, 50. And in a background of about 10 ppm arsenic, we got a 54 ppm arsenic, which we drilled a couple of days later, which was the Torian discovery hole. So there's a clear link to the mineralization. Just like that day, we've had a few more days further to the northwest. We've picked up 45 ppms, 50 ppms. So we're not running out of north-northwest strike at Mount Sterling. It's clearly there. It's a matter of time. It's permitting, and it's the resources we throw at the strike. I mean, you know, some people may have laughed at the strike we threw at Mount Sterling back in November, December, and you know, we've got a resource almost, you know, not quite a kilometre yet, but we definitely have intercepts a kilometre on a kilometre scale, and I still hold to the, you know, statement that we said it was over. I think it was 1.25 or 2.25. Look, it's thereabouts, and there'll be multiple of these structures. Don't forget that. We still haven't started exploring the Ursus, which, if you look at Red 5, that's brought them a lot of shallow oxide resources to their operation, to their 10-year mine life, or whatever it is at this stage. So we've got the ingredients, we've got the ground, we've got the funds, and it's now a matter of obviously we're converting ounces, tonnages, and we're getting multiple of these in the next couple of quarters. So I see a very, very nice. There was a question about resource upgrades every quarter. I don't hold us to the quarters, but there'll be definitely a couple of resource updates going forward every year at least.
A few months, yeah.
For Sterling project, definitely.
Next question, has there been any talk with Red 5 re the use of the Tamula station or JV? Paul, do you want to touch on this one?
Yes, we have been talking with Red 5. Obviously, now that we have our hand on the station, Red 5 have to come to us with permission regarding a lot of the activities they want to undertake. And the most recent of which was a gas pipeline. And we, in the end, were assisting in respect of the approval of the gas pipeline for Red 5 to further their future milling operations. And they were very assisting to us in respect of some of the desires we had in respect of the station, and have helped in that regard. I see no reason why we won't have a very good working relationship with Red 5 in the future. Red 5 are not the only one operating in the area. Since we've been involved with the pastoral station, we've had approaches from quite a few major mining corporations acting on Tamula, including FMG, St Barbara, and I think even Round Oak, so with their Jaguar project. So it's a good way of keeping a handle on what's going on out there, and it also enhances our working relationship with our neighbours. So we're very happy with the acquisition. We think it was very strategic and was opportune for the company to be able to acquire it at the time. And we also think that it will be a very good investment financially for Torian going forward. We've got great designs for the station, and it's going to provide a very, very good accommodation facility for Torian going forward, and a great home for Torian in the area. We're committed to Leonora, we're committed to the township, the people, and the ground we're working on, and the station just enhances that.
And I'll just add something. Literally, as you were speaking there, Paul, we've just received an email from the station manager on that topic, that we've got an order from St. Barbara for 52 drill pads mid to late May, and another exploration company in the region wanting accommodation for 7 people and some earthworks as well. So yeah, so it's quite exciting, and we do have now relationships with a number of the players in the region: Northern Star, St. Barbara, Red 5, Round Oak, and then some smaller exploration companies as well. Would you update the expected diorite multiple assay results? Were they resubmitted some time ago? I think we've covered that question. Are any board members participating in the Mount Monger spin-off? From a financial perspective, I could say that I am. I can talk for myself, and Paul, you are as well.
Yes.
I know too much, Peretz. I don't think I can.
Sorry?
I know too much. I don't think I can. I'd love to, but unfortunately, I think I know a little bit too much about the ground. So.
Oh well. What benefits, synergies are you seeing from having Nova as a major shareholder? Well, I guess for starters, there's been a great financial support. Not the raise we just did, but the one prior to that. They did cornerstone that raise. I speak to directors of Nova very regularly. We have a great working relationship. We share knowledge. Obviously, the people working at Nova are quite knowledgeable people, whilst they are working at a little bit of a different type of a gold deposit. Obviously, still very experienced geologists and technical people there. Dale Schultz, who is a geologist at Nova, is also on our board and providing us a lot of assistance. There's also some cost sharing arrangements that we have with people, as well as software and things like that we can share with each other. So they're great support for us, and our belief is, and based on recent conversations, they'll continue to be a great support for Torian moving forward. Do the purchase of Tamula give any commercial benefits or leverage with Red 5? I believe that's been answered. Numerous commercial benefits. I mean, just look at the carbon credits. By the way, the price of cattle in Australia, it's not why we bought the station, but the price of cattle is at all-time highs. That can be a significant cash influx for us as well, considering purchasing all those cows. And then obviously the accommodation facilities. I mean, setting up an office there, the earth moving, so that's for rehab, for clearing pads, for drill holes, all of that, we become the owners. And also in terms of speaking with our neighbors, Paul mentioned Red 5 are putting their mine on our ground right now. So yes, we do need to be in constant conversation with them, and they do need to seek our approval on anything that they do. They've committed to various capital improvements around their mine for the station as well. As a shareholder, I wanted to thank the team at Torian for their great work. Keep it up, guys. Thank you very much. It's nice to hear positive feedback. If the lab delays are due to process and general demand that is very different to the COVID justification that has been given across the sector, not specifically TNR in general, can you comment more on this? Yes, I guess, look, the fact is that there has been a resource boom. And from what we're hearing anecdotally, there's more drilling programs taking place in the gold fields. Well, I can't say than ever before, but it's significant. And obviously that means lots of different assays are being given to the lab. And then initially there was COVID justification in the sense that the labs were understaffed, just the amount of people they were able to have. And as Paul mentioned, ongoing, the border closures has meant, less skilled workers from overseas. Is there any more to comment on that? I think everything else has pretty much been addressed. So apart from Red 5, which is approximately 450 million market cap, who else is surrounding our properties? Oh, just a couple of small players like Northern Star and Santa Barbara. Obviously meant that sarcastically. Those that know the size of those companies, they're the largest. Some of the largest. I think Northern Star is the second largest gold producer in the country by some distance, and Santa Barbara is, I think, in the top 10 for sure. FMG holds some ground there, I believe, a little bit. Obviously, Round Oak, which is a subsidiary of Washington Soul Pattinson. So we are in a very well-endowed region, and our neighbours are quite, they're the big boys, that's for sure. We're playing with some of the larger players in the region. Do you want to add anything to that, Paul or Claudio?
Well, Claudio knows probably because he's walking the ground all the time, some of the other players in there, but there are a lot of new players in the area as well. If there's any free ground available, there's a lot of companies jumping on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those that want to look up, I think what's Northern Star, about a 15 billion market cap at the moment after their merger with Saracen, something like that. Quite significant. And St. Barbara's a few billion as well. My dumb question, why not build your own lab housed in the contracting business we are soon to settle on? Yeah, that'd be nice. Building a lab is a significant capital investment. It doesn't have much to do with the contracting business that we're purchasing, which is machinery and the heavy earth-moving equipment. It's a significant investment. You need specifically skilled people. It's not something that any of the major companies do on their own, I don't think. And it's not something not on our strategic plan at this stage. But you know what? It's the forces of supply and demand. If the supply is outstripping demand, then it's an opportunity for those that are looking to either expand their laboratory businesses or create new ones. That's for sure. And I wish I had shares in laboratory businesses about a year ago. Would be okay now.
There's also obviously a question of independence, because laboratories have to be independent. I don't think it would be well received if mining companies started doing their own assaying, to be honest, but and releasing it to the market.
Not for exploration, but it quite often happens for mining operations. You have your own labs to get that quick turnaround, but you're not releasing that to a chalk standard.
You can acquire containerized labs, but it wouldn't suit our purposes.
We're almost finished. We just got another question here. You touched on the high cattle price. How many cows on the property? We can do our own assumption on revenue. How many cows on the property? So that's a good question. We're not 100% sure, neither is the station owner. There is anywhere between 900 and 1,300 head of cattle on the property.
750. To the pastoral board, it's 750 head. Because of the nature of the station, and it's very open fenced, the estimate is there's around 1,100 head. There's officially 750. We'll find out as we undertake mustering shortly. And at I understand it's $3 a kilo at the moment, which is the highest it's been. So we'll be mustering shortly to take advantage of those high prices. Yeah,
and look, I think the other thing is the way that it was really an eye opener going out there to the station, speaking to the station manager. I can't remember what I asked him, but I asked him about something on the property, and he said, "Oh, it's not here, but if you go 60 kilometers north on the property, you'll find it there." And just that concept that the property continues going for 60 kilometers is quite enormous. It's quite extraordinary. So it's quite vast in the region, and the way it works is, sometimes cattle move between properties a little bit. We're blessed with having a lot of water on our property, a number of lakes, a lot of wells that have been dug. So the cattle does tend to hang around Tamula. It's again a little bit of a side benefit of purchasing the station. We didn't purchase it to become farmers, but I guess by default we are, in a way, to a degree. So Paul's gone out and bought us a Cobra, and we'll be moving out to
the station.
Out to the station. So look, the cattle is definitely a bonus for us, and the prices are much higher now than they were when we initially sign the deal. I think that concludes today's webinar. So thank you everybody for joining. I hope we've been able to answer some of your questions, allay some of the concerns that people might have had. As we mentioned last time, we really appreciate shareholder feedback. So when shareholders do email us directly with questions, those of you that have, you know that we are forthcoming in responding to the best of our ability. We try to keep the market as informed as we possibly can. And yeah, you know, at the end of the day, as shareholders in the business, and I always say this, we as directors work for you. We're trying to increase the value of your shareholding to the best of our ability. And as directors, we thank you for putting your trust in the company. And as owners of the business, we encourage you to take an active interest in the business and in our future plans. So thank you everybody for joining. I think that concludes our session for today. This session has been recorded and it will be uploaded to YouTube, and it will be shared through Torian's social media networks for those to have a watch. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.